Hello, welcome to Garden Chronicles. My name is James David, and in today's video I would like to talk about this particular type of ferns known as Staghorn ferns. Just a little bit of an introduction. These are actually a compilation of a video that I've taken in a local nursery here in Sg Buloh, and I find that it is quite informative and educational to check through what exactly is how this particular fern is actually been cultivated and actually in a way to grow and their cultivating factor. Just some basics. This is actually grown in a hot tropical humid area here in Malaysia, and I find that these are very much native type of ferns. However, I'll be skipping off all the general basic idea of Staghorn ferns, which you can actually find in other common in beginners guide factor for Staghorn ferns. Here I actually would like to share my thoughts and opinion and my experience concern this particular type of ferns. One thing for sure is that I want to explain to you on the context of how these ferns are actually sold, in a way of how it's been mounted and how it is been presented as a plant for sale purpose. Another context that I've actually find intriguing is, though these particular ferns are hardy, especially when it comes to tropical climate, somehow these particular ones are actually sensitive types of ferns. Due to that nature, these ferns do not survive, and in most cases rot and fall apart due to some stress factors and overwatering or even underwatering when they are actually receiving lack of humidity and in bright hot sun, and of course in other cases where they are overfed and the type of fertilizer is actually not suitable for them, the whole thing can just fall apart. So here I just want to talk on the basic elements, and we will go through one by one. So stick with me and enjoy the show. This is how basically you will notice when these are actually sold in a local nursery, and I find that it is somehow not at the optimum style of planting them. These are, you can actually consider it as a baby plant or baby Staghorn fern, which actually come from a source where these plantlet or seedlings per se or sporas that has been grown in a sphagnum moss, and somehow it's actually more than one plant, so you can actually find 3 to 4 babies tucked together in a coconut peat and placed it in this kind of condition. I can say roughly this could have been roughly like a year old, or perhaps even maybe 6 months to 2 to 3 years. It can happen that way because these are extremely slow growing plant. But however, I noticed that when I look at it, it's very much uniform. So in a context, these are actually grown from a farm or cultivated in a mass production style. Do take note that for initial purpose this is okay, but in a long term, if they were to receive too much water, the whole root ball can rot away. So this is one of the setbacks that you actually face when it comes to Staghorn ferns planted in this kind of context. Another issue here is the cocoa peat. Basically, it is a very wrong medium to use for when it comes to a fully matured or growing plant, because I find that cocoa peat tend to absorb too much of water, and if it's overwatering or overwatered, the whole thing can rot away. However, the plus point here is that this particular planted ferns are actually very cheap. 15 ringgit is considered it's actually a steal, because when you look at that kind of context, beginning wise in this kind of plants, especially Platycerium bifurcatum, can cost roughly about 30 ringgit for this size. That is actually minimum. If at all, if an established plant in a way that it looks good looking, I think optimal price would be somewhere around 50 RM50. So 15 seems to be a very good price to be purchased and to actually reset it according to its optimal growth. I have found another collection of ferns sold in a local nursery nearby, and what is intriguing here is that these are actually now hanged and placed as hanging plants here, and I find they seems to be doing fairly well, but in long term you might find that these particular plants may suffer overgrowth because this is actually planted in a wrong way, in a way to say that the upside of the crown is actually the top. It's supposed to be sideways, so the setbacks that you're going to receive here is that the plant, this ferns, is going to suffer as it grows bigger because this is not the position that they are supposed to be grown. It's supposed to be sideways, but this has been planted upright in manner, and you can see that the shield is slowly rotting away. In long term it may fall apart, but if it's going to be acclimatized, it may slowly turn its position, and it's going to be lopsided because the balance and the situation is going to be a little bit difficult for the plant to how do you say, align itself to its normal condition. So it's going to be, how do you say, on the context of its delivery and for sale, I think this is okay, but in long term it's not going to be good for this particular plant. So these are the things that a lot of gardeners need to take thought of and take note of, because this is not it's supposed to be its ideal condition to growth. Because as time goes by, if let's say we were to place it under rain and shine, which you should, because this need to have bright indirect light, and it will not do so well in dark shaded area because it will fall apart. And when it's receiving a lot of light, it's also going to receive a lot of sunlight and also a lot of rain, and eventually the whole thing will fall. So this is another nursery which I found, and I find it very intriguing, is because they have finally got it right. You can see other ferns are actually also attached in this kind of manner, where you can see the whole root ball has been taken out and is been fastened on a plywood. It's one of the most ingenious way of making it happen, because I find that it's sort of a netting and a kind of a plywood thing is been fastened against it, and I think this will work, because in a way this is how it's supposed to be. The plant itself will find its measure of aligning itself to its natural way of growth. However, I believe that this has actually been taken out from that earlier pot kind of thing and been fastened this way, and I find that this is good because it is going to create a fast draining kind of a situation for the medium to dry out immediately after watering, and so it will not cause rot problems in a long run. You can actually see here that the root ball is still in this kind of pattern where it's actually like a mold coming out from a plastic pot, which I shown you earlier, and the plant has actually grown a little bit bigger, and I find that this is how it should be actually mounted or grown in this kind of context. Of course, the other factor is due to the way that this plant has established itself, so the root ball has come to this kind of size. So you see, the shield is sort of like suffering to find its own way. I think this particular one has finally established itself, as I mentioned earlier. Like 2 to 3 plants are planted together, and slowly they have found their way to separate and move out and establish itself. So this is one of the things that you have to take note of if you were to buy the potted plant of this Platycerium. You may have to do this, and there is a risk involved because they can get stressed and the whole thing can rot and fall apart if it's too late, in a way that if it's too wet and then the time that you actually purchase it, it's not really healthy. You can see that these particular ones are quite established, so in a way you can see the male fronds has established itself by pointing upward, and the shield has become very much on a vertical side. So this is what I want to show to you, that this is the right way of growing these ferns. I must say that this is very much ideal for them. Bright indirect light, and when it comes to watering, most probably they actually been used a hose, and they would have just spray the water upon them in a way that the root ball will be flushed out wherever there is an excess water involved. And there is also a different type of bird nest fern. I think this is more of the hybrid types, which is having a lot of frills on these particular leaves, and I find that they are quite resilient in a way that they're able to handle circumstances and situation according to the growth patterns. Okay, this is another one. This is a conorarium, if I'm not wrong, and I find that it does not actually have a base at the back, and so it is you can see like some of it didn't really do well, and some of it was actually taken out from the crown and it's just making do. Okay, this particular one, if you notice, it's sort of like overwatered, and so these are the signs that you actually see a bit of browning around the crown. And I've noticed that this particular species is a little bit more sensitive and can be finicky, so the best thing to do is to actually get them when they are still in baby form or plantlet. But if you were to get something which is established, you may face this kind of problem where the whole thing can go stressed out and everything dry out, and then a new growth will take place, and it will be very slow growing actually. So these are the setbacks that you receive when it comes to Staghorn ferns. Do check out my earlier video on how I care for them. Actually, I shared more on detail on how to care and grow and cultivate them. Here's very much more on the idea of what is being sold here and what to watch out for. Now, coming back to the factor of something to watch out for, this is what I really want to mention when it comes to what is entirely very important. Try to avoid to purchase anything that is as brown and burnt like this, because chances of survival of this particular fern or this root ball may not survive. I think chances of it surviving is maybe like 10%. I think it's most likely 90% is gone, and this is actually more on the factor because of overwater. The whole thing may have attacked with fungus problem or even bacterial infection, so it cannot survive. And the thing here is that you may have to use fungicide and all those kind of chemicals to jumpstart the plant, and it can be expensive, especially when the plant is as established as this. And these are the cases where you actually face that sometimes these plants are actually sold for an offer price, and the vendors may just try to push this plant to you to cover their losses. And in most cases, beginners will think that they actually strike a very good bargain, and eventually find that the whole plant is actually falling apart in a week's time, or most probably in a month. So you may have to use a lot of fungicides and chemicals to jumpstart the plant, and it may take years. So if you can, try to avoid this kind of plants where it's already showing signs of rot, or in the sense that browning and burns and this kind of stuff. Basically it's actually rotting, so try to avoid purchasing it, or unless if you are a type that is don't mind trying it out and see and experimenting on it, then it will be actually a good while to try your hands on it, if at all the vendor is willing to give you for a very good price and you want to see whether you can revive it. But otherwise, if you're a beginner, I will strongly advise you to refrain from buying this kind of plants, because it's actually a goner. This is another collection of Staghorn ferns found in a different nursery, which I find it's very much highly cared for. In a way, I can believe that these are premium prices, and I find that the quality appears to be very good, and I just want to showcase to you on their appearance and the way that it's been presented. You can see over here, it's this particular mesh kind of thing is actually more of a plastic board, and I think this is very much suitable for this particular type of ferns, and this one is actually more on a hybrid, and I can't really figure out their name. And I can also see that it's already spending close to 1k. In a way, I believe that these are highly premium plants, and I believe that this could be because it is coming from a collector and they are hybrid, and therefore a lot of time and effort and patience has been cultivated for this, and I believe this is why these particular plants are actually expensive. Another thing that I can actually say is that due to the growing condition, they are highly stable, so there's nothing much to be worried about. And I want to mention to you that I believe that they are watered from at the back, so just their root ball tend to get wet, and most likely maybe from the top, and so therefore watering may not be an issue here because they are actually very well open to sunlight and rain. And so therefore I believe that this is how they are actually grown in a natural condition here, and I find that everything seems to be perfectly growing. You can see other types of ferns and plants are growing from the root ball. In a way, I believe that they can be a colony plant, in a way to say that when it comes to Platycerium, there can be more than one type of plant growing on them. So this is a type of ferns which I find that if you're a collector, I believe that a lot of it appear to be alike, but actually they are very different. So even I may not be able to exactly identify them unless they are vastly different based on their species. So a lot has been taken place where a lot of crossbreed and hybrid has been made in a way for their features, and I find that it quite be very interesting. Now coming back to the last part of the collection, I find that this is very much old school. I find that this particular wood board, I think as a tree trunk, has been actually sliced up, and I find that these are mounted, and I find that these ferns have established itself fairly well. So in a way, I can say that they are quite hardy if when their conditions are properly met. Especially you can see that indirect bright light, in a way they can just receive a few hours of light and they are receiving sun and rain, and in a way enough space for it to grow without any obstacles, and they are free to grow. So this is one of the things that I've noticed by observation and on their growing conditions, that they don't like too much water, neither they don't like too much sun, but the balance of both. So you can see another set of collection here. In my earlier video I just have showed to you, and I find that in their mountain condition a lot of nails has been used to fasten them, and I find that I believe this is actually bifurcatum in their matured form, and I find that this seems to become more on a colony plant, and there's a lot more fronds taking place upon this piece of slab. So it's interesting to see that they are doing fairly well, and based on what I noticed, you can notice that even something's been nailed on it, and upon the root ball, and it's still alive. Of course there's some of it just managed to sprout out here and there, but in a way it's interesting. So this is what I noticed, that they can be very resilient and hardy, and not, how do you say, easy to die if they are grown in a proper conditions. So their root ball is not so much thick or in a way that they require so much of watering. I find that this is very much like a fastened plant, so as long as they get what they need, they're actually happy. Now I've come to the end of my video. Like any other videos, if you have any questions, do put your comment below, and I try my best as possible to answer them based on according to my experience and my opinion on that. And if you can, please, I really appreciate if you can click like and subscribe, and also if you can, please put in your name and where you're from, so I will know basically your location, and I will really like to know you personally in the context of able to communicate with you via comments. Now apart from that, I hope